I never planned on blowing up an entire HR department with one phone call. I just wanted to pay my rent, do my job, and maybe sleep through the night without dreaming about error logs and deadline emails. If you'd asked anyone at my company who the safe employee was, they would have pointed at me. Quiet guy, 6 years in the same chair, keeps the systems running, doesn't cause trouble. Turns out that's exactly the kind of person they think they can gut first. The meeting invite hit my inbox at 8:07 a.m. on a Tuesday. Check-in, HR and management, 9 a.m. Conference room, 4B. No agenda, no context, just that. I stared at it for a second, a little longer than I should have. I'd seen enough people walk into check-ins and walk out with a cardboard box to know the pattern. But we'd just delivered the biggest project in our department. My overtime was still baking into the system. I had 3 live tickets from our biggest client sitting in my queue with my name literally written into the contract as primary contact. So I told myself it was probably nothing. By 8:15, the office already felt different. The open plan floor was the same. Humming PCs, stale coffee smell, low murmur of people who hated mornings. But people looked up when I walked to the kitchen. 2 junior devs stopped talking mid-sentence when they saw me. My manager, Mike, was standing by the printer pretending to read something, jaw clenched. In that way, I'd learned meant, I know something I'm not going to say. You got a minute? I asked him quietly. He didn't meet my eyes. That's what 9 o'clock is for, he said, and it landed wrong. Not we've got to check in, just that. Should I be worried? I pushed. He exhaled through his nose, still staring at the paper that had already printed. Just hear them out, okay? Don't react in the room. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Mike isn't brave, but he's not cruel. If he was warning me not to react, he'd already chosen a side. I didn't drink the coffee I poured. My hands weren't steady enough for the lid. At 8:57, I walked into conference room 4B. The blinds were half closed, that fake privacy you get when they want you to feel trapped, but technically visible. HR was already there. Karen, the HR director, in her usual pastel blazer, and one of the generalists, typing on a laptop like a court stenographer. Mike sat on the far side of the table, distant, like a guest. Morning, Grant, Karen said, all teeth and no warmth. Have a seat. There was a printed folder in front of my chair. That was new. Usually, HR just talked and followed up with an email. Paper meant they'd practice this. I sat. What's going on? Karen folded her hands like she was about to pray. I want to start by saying we really value your contributions here. There it was, the pre-packaged condolence before the hit. Okay, I said slowly. As you know, the company's been going through some restructuring. Her voice had that rehearsed softness people use at funerals. I knew we'd lost 2 smaller clients. I also knew we'd just signed a 3-year extension with Halberd Systems, worth more than those 2 combined. I know because I'd personally stayed up until 2 a.m. 3 nights in a row to make sure their integration demo didn't crash in front of their VP. I'm aware of the restructuring, I answered. Right. She smiled like we were co-conspirators. Well, after carefully reviewing compensation across teams, we've identified some misalignments between salary bands and market benchmarks. Unfortunately, your current compensation is significantly above the revised level for your role. My ears started ringing, but I made myself keep my voice even. Meaning what, exactly? She slid the folder toward me with 2 manicured fingers. We're adjusting your salary to bring it in line with the new structure. Effective next month, your base will be reduced by 60%. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. It came out short and sharp, and all 3 of them flinched. 60, I repeated. You're cutting my pay by 60%. Karen tilted her head, sympathetic mask still glued in place. It's a difficult adjustment, we know, but we wanted to give you the opportunity to stay on the team. Many people in your situation don't get that option. You're doing me a favor, I said, staring at the number in the folder. The new salary might as well have been minimum wage with health insurance. Mike shifted in his chair. He still hadn't said a word. The HR generalist kept typing. Karen went on. We did consider alternatives, but given your tenure and the new ranges, this is the most sustainable path for the company. Of course, if you feel this doesn't work for you, we can process a voluntary resignation instead. There's no scenario, I said slowly, where I keep my current salary. We're past the negotiation stage, she said. This is a business decision, not a performance discussion. My mind started splitting in two. One half was pure animal panic. Rent, grocery bills, the loan I'd co-signed for my brother, my mom's medical stuff I helped with when insurance didn't cover it. The other half went cold and clinical, scanning for facts. Can I ask, I said, which role you benchmarked me against? She blinked. Pardon? You said my compensation needs to align with the band for my role. Which role is that? Because my contract says Senior Implementation Engineer, Key Account Lead, Halberd Systems. Karen's smile dimmed just a fraction. We've consolidated several titles into broader bands. You're now in the Generalized Implementation Specialist band. Implementation Specialist. The same band as the guy we hired 2 months ago who still asks me how to reset the staging server. How many implementation specialists do we have who are named in the Halberd contract? I asked. Mike cleared his throat. Grant? No, it's a fair question, I said, still looking at Karen. You've seen the contract. They wrote me into it. By name. We're not discussing client relationships today, she said, just a little too fast. We're discussing internal structure. And internally, this is the band you fall into. And if I decline? I asked. Karen's voice softened again, back to the funeral tone. Then today will be your last day. We'll mark it as voluntary, of course, and provide a neutral reference. But I'd hate for you to make an emotional decision you'll regret. The market's challenging right now. And a termination? I pushed. What happens if I don't sign and I don't volunteer? She hesitated just long enough to answer the question I'd actually asked. That would be a different process. Performance review, documentation, potential impact on references. We don't want to go that route. In other words, sign the haircut, or we'll slowly poison your career. I sat back and let the silence stretch. The HR generalist stopped typing, waiting for the script to continue. Mike's knee bounced under the table. Nobody looked at the folder like a human being had to live inside those numbers. Why me? I asked finally. You said you reviewed compensation across teams. Am I the only one getting the 60% cut? Karen's jaw tightened for half a second. I can't discuss other employees' arrangements. So that's a yes, I said. Or at least I'm the worst of them. This isn't personal, Grant. It felt personal. It felt like someone had taken 6 years of late nights and crisis calls and put a clearance sticker on them. I'm not signing anything today, I said. Karen folded her hands tighter. You understand that if you don't sign the adjustment by end of day Friday, we'll move forward with the assumption that you're resigning. No, I said calmly. If I resign, I'll send a resignation letter. If you fire me, you'll send a termination letter. There's no assumption in between. Something flickered in her eyes then, annoyance maybe, or the first realization that I wasn't going to play my scripted role. Take the folder, she said. Think about it. Talk to whoever you need to talk to. I'd just encourage you to be realistic. It's a tough market, and your current comp is unlikely elsewhere. The funny thing is, under normal circumstances, she might have been right. I'm not some Silicon Valley rock star. I'm just good at a very specific, very boring thing for one very important client. But that client didn't think I was boring. They thought I was the reason their systems didn't burn down. I picked up the folder. It felt heavier than it should have. Is that all? For now, Karen said, and Grant. Try not to take this as a punishment. We're all making sacrifices. My cheeks felt hot, but my voice stayed flat. Are you taking the 60% cut? She didn't answer. I stood up, nodded once at Mike. He couldn't meet my eyes. I walked out of 4B past the half-closed blinds, past the generalist who suddenly couldn't look at me, down the hallway that felt shorter than it had that morning. Back at my desk, my monitor had gone to sleep. When I woke it up, Outlook refreshed. A new email sat at the top of my inbox. Subject: Renewal Roadmap Question. Need your input before legal signs. It was from Halberd's Director of Operations. She'd sent it 5 minutes earlier. Beneath that, 3 older threads from the same woman, all variations of the same sentence. We'll only move forward if Grant is staying on as our main contact. I stared at those lines for a long moment, the folder still warm in my hand, the new salary number burning behind my eyes. They thought they were holding the only leverage in the room. They really had no idea. I sat at my desk pretending to read the renewal email, but the words blurred together. My pulse wasn't racing anymore. The fear had burned itself out and left something colder, sharper. 6 years of doing everything right, and HR had practically laughed in my face while cutting my salary into a fraction. I tried to work, but my brain kept circling the same questions. Why me? Why now? Why a number so extreme it wasn't even an insult? It was a message. At 10:24 a.m., Mike finally walked over. He hovered by my chair like he was checking on a wounded animal. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I didn't turn around. "You knew?" He exhaled through his nose. I knew something was coming. Not the exact number. You didn't object. "Grant, it's above my pay grade." I almost laughed again. That sentence was starting to follow me like a curse. "You could have said something. They would have done it anyway," he murmured. "You know how this place works." That was the problem. I did know. HR didn't make decisions in a vacuum. They only pulled the trigger when someone higher up handed them the gun. I watched Mike walk back to his desk, shoulders slumped, and realized he wasn't my ally. He was a man trying not to drown, and drowning people don't save you. They pull you under with them. My inbox dinged again. This time it was from accounting, a routine request, a form they needed me to sign so they could process incoming Q2 invoices for Halberd. Except something about it snapped into place like a puzzle piece sliding home. The form required my approval because I was the designated point of contact. Not the department, not the team. Me. Halberd didn't trust anyone else with their billing structure because they'd been burned before, twice, by previous account managers who messed up renewals and file transfers. I'd spent months fixing those relationships. I'd earned their trust. HR didn't just undervalue my position, they had no idea what my position actually was. That thought should have comforted me. Instead, it made my skin tighten. If they were willing to rewrite job titles to fit their banding system, they weren't planning to keep me long term. They were consolidating, rounding off edges, flattening roles. I wasn't overpaid. I was inconvenient. And inconvenient employees get erased. I opened the folder again. The new salary number almost made me nauseous. It wasn't meant to keep me. It was meant to push me out without severance. A push so forceful it came disguised as choice. The anger didn't hit all at once. It built slowly, like pressure behind a closed door. First, irritation at their arrogance, then disbelief at how poorly they calculated their move, and finally, insult, sharp enough to cut. When the anger settled, something else surfaced, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Leverage. My phone buzzed. A Teams ping from someone in sales. "Hey Grant, Halberd is asking about you again. They want confirmation you're staying past Q3. Should I tell them yes?" I stared at the message. That was it. The moment something aligned inside me. I typed back, "Don't answer yet. I'll handle it." The truth clicked into place so cleanly I almost smiled. HR thought they held all the cards. They had no idea the entire Halberd contract. That cushy, celebrated $1 million crown jewel they bragged about at every internal meeting rested on one unglamorous line item. Primary contact, Grant E. I leaned back in my chair, the folder still open beside me, and whispered to myself, they really have no idea what they just started. But the decision wasn't made yet. I don't work on impulse. I needed to know exactly what Halberd would say if they learned the truth. Not guesses, not assumptions. Proof. At lunch, instead of eating, I stepped outside behind the parking garage where cell service was best. I scrolled to the number for Halberd's director of operations, Marissa. We weren't friends, but we'd spent enough nights troubleshooting vendor errors together that she trusted me. My thumb hovered over the call button, and then, as if the universe wanted to add a drum roll, my phone buzzed with an email from Karen in HR. Subject: friendly reminder, salary adjustment acknowledgement. Body: please remember to return the signed form by end of day Friday. Happy to answer any questions. That smiley face nearly sent me into orbit. I hit call. Marissa picked up on the second ring. Grant, everything okay? I hesitated only long enough to choose my words. Marissa, I need to clarify something regarding my position here. Internally, they're restructuring my role. There's a possibility I won't be the point of contact moving forward. Silence. Not static. Real, heavy silence. Then, what do you mean, restructuring? I mean, they're pushing me into a different band, and there's a chance I won't be here after this quarter. Another silence, longer, sharper. Grant, she said finally, that's not acceptable. You know we only renewed because you stayed on. You know our board insisted on continuity. If they're removing you, that changes everything. That's why I'm telling you, I said quietly. She exhaled sharply, annoyance, disbelief, anger all mixed together. I'll escalate it. Immediately. Marissa, no, she cut me off. If they're planning to move you, we have a problem, a very big one. I didn't expect what she said next. Grant, if you leave, we pull the contract. Every hair on my arms lifted. That's not a threat, she clarified. It's a reality. We require you, not your department. You. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something like vindication. I understand, I said. We'll set a call with your executive team this afternoon. I'll handle the rest. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the dark phone screen. I looked calm. Too calm. But calm doesn't mean safe. Because the moment I walked back inside, I realized something. HR had no idea I just lit a fuse under their entire department. And worse, they had no idea how fast it was burning. But that wasn't the beginning. Not even close. The real beginning happened at 3:42 p.m., when my manager returned to my desk, pale and sweaty, and said, Grant, they're asking for you in the executive boardroom. Right now. And then silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. By the time I reached the executive boardroom, I could feel the tension leaking through the walls. Voices, raised ones, bled into the hallway. Not the usual corporate politeness, but the sharp, clipped tones of people realizing something expensive was slipping out of their hands. Mike stood outside the door, wringing his hands like he was praying for a fire drill. They're already talking to Halberd? He whispered. I didn't answer. I just opened the door. The room snapped into silence. At the table sat our CFO, red-faced and sweating, the VP of Operations, stiff as rebar, HR Director Karen, pale and tight-lipped, the CEO, who rarely showed up on site unless something was on fire. Every laptop screen showed the same thing, a paused video call with Halberd's leadership team. Mid-conversation, my CEO forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Grant, good. Join us. I stepped inside. Karen wouldn't look at me. The CFO tapped his pen so fast it was a tremor. The CEO gestured to the empty chair across from him. Sit. I didn't. I'm fine standing. He nodded once like that confirmed a suspicion. We've been speaking with Halberd. They've raised concerns. Concerns. That was one way to describe. We will pull our multi-million-dollar contract if you let Grant go. The VP cleared his throat. Did you inform them you were considering leaving? No, I said flatly. I informed them that HR was restructuring my role. Karen flinched. It was tiny, half a breath, but I saw it. The CFO jumped in, voice shaky. Grant, we value you, but Halberd seems to believe they require you specifically. That's unusual. It's also in the contract, I said. Page 3, Clause 7. The VP looked like I'd slapped him. You memorized it? I lived inside that contract for 6 months, I replied. Of course I did. The CEO tapped his fingers once, twice, then steepled them. Let's not get defensive. We simply need to understand what was communicated. I told them the truth, I said, that HR informed me I was being moved into a lower band with a 60% pay cut and that my tenure here was uncertain. Karen finally snapped her head up. I never said your tenure was uncertain. You offered me 2 choices, I said, a massive pay cut or to resign. That sounds uncertain. A muscle jumped in her jaw. The CEO exhaled slowly, turning toward her. Karen, did you authorize a 60% reduction? I followed the new compensation structure, she insisted. He was significantly above the band. We needed alignment. And did you consider how that would impact our relationship with Halberd? He pressed. Karen hesitated, then swallowed. I didn't realize they were that dependent on him. The CFO barked a humorless laugh. They're dependent on him to the point of threatening to terminate the contract. We're talking layoffs, budget collapse, reversals. This is catastrophic. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. The CEO leaned back, studying me with the kind of expression predators get when they realize their prey has teeth. Grant, he said slowly, Halberd told us plainly that your role on the project is non-negotiable. They also expressed displeasure at the idea that your compensation would be reduced. That's between you and them, I said. He nodded once, almost respectful. Perhaps. But if this situation isn't resolved immediately, we could lose our largest account. The room held its breath. Then the CEO spoke the words that detonated everything. What would it take for you to stay? Karen's eyes widened like she'd been slapped with cold water. I met the CEO's stare. You're asking me to negotiate my own position? I'm asking, he said, how we fix this. Before I could answer, the pause call suddenly unpaused automatically. The speakers crackled to life. Marissa's voice came through crisp and unyielding. Before you fix anything, I want to be perfectly clear. If Grant's role changes, if his compensation is cut, or if there is any disruption to continuity, Halberd is prepared to terminate the contract within 48 hours. Everyone froze. I'm assuming he's in the room, Marissa continued. Grant, you still there? I stepped forward slightly. I'm here. Good, she said. We want you to stay on this project. Whether that's through your company or somewhere else is up to you. The CFO dropped his pen. Somewhere else? The CEO repeated carefully. Yes, Marissa said. If he leaves, we'd like to contract him directly, at a higher rate than you currently pay him. Karen made a choking sound. The CEO's expression didn't change, but something in him broke. Thank you, Marissa, he said tightly. We'll follow up. The call disconnected. Silence. No, something heavier than silence. The moment right before a building collapses. The CEO folded his hands. Grant, sit. This time I did. Here's what's going to happen, he said, shifting his gaze to Karen. The salary reduction is void, effective immediately. Karen swallowed but didn't argue. We'll draft a new agreement, he continued. A salary adjustment, upward. A retention bonus. Support staff for Halberd so you're not overloaded. A guarantee of autonomy on that account. The VP scribbled notes furiously. And HR, the CEO added, turning his head with icy precision, will no longer be involved in anything regarding Grant, his performance, his compensation, or his clients. Karen went pale. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched the pieces fall exactly where they deserved to. The CEO leaned forward. Grant, can you accept these terms? I looked at the folder Karen had handed me that morning, the one with the insult printed in ink, and closed it slowly. I'll consider the offer, I said, but understand something. 4 pairs of eyes locked onto me. I don't stay anywhere out of fear, I said quietly. Only respect, and you've got a lot of work to do to earn that back. The CFO nodded quickly, almost desperate. Completely fair, he said. Completely. But that was just the negotiation. The actual consequences landed 15 minutes later, when security walked into the boardroom. Not for me, for Karen. She stood up in shock, sputtering, "You can't, wait, this isn't—" But they escorted her out anyway. That should have felt like justice. And maybe it did, for half a second. But the real satisfaction didn't hit until I checked my email. A new message from the CEO. "Please meet with me tomorrow to finalize your new compensation package." And beneath it, a forwarded message from Halberd. "If Grant leaves, we follow him." They thought I was replaceable. They thought wrong. I didn't sleep much that night, not from stress, but from the strange, buzzing quiet that follows after months of being pushed, cornered, underestimated. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't dreading the morning. I was curious about it. When I walked into the office the next day, people actually looked at me. Not the nervous, avoidant glances from before, but the sharp, curious kind you give someone who survived an explosion you didn't see coming. Word travels fast in corporate halls, especially when security escorts the head of HR out of the building before lunch. Mike approached my desk carefully, like I'd turned radioactive overnight. "Hey," he said. "You, okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, and I was. More than fine. He nodded, relieved but wary. "They're waiting for you upstairs." Of course they were. The executive conference room felt different this time. Less like a firing squad, more like a negotiation table in a hostage situation where they'd realized who the hostage actually was. The CEO stood when I entered. The CFO gave a stiff, formal nod. The VP pushed a folder toward me like it was an offering to a deity who might smite him. "Grant," the CEO began, "we've prepared a revised agreement." Revised was putting it lightly. The new contract included a significant raise, more than I'd ever asked for, a retention bonus large enough to erase months of stress in a single stroke, funding for 2 assistants dedicated solely to the Halberd account, a clause guaranteeing autonomy on all client decisions, and the kicker, a written guarantee that no changes to my role, pay, or structure could occur without my explicit approval. It was more power than anyone in my position had ever been given. The CFO leaned forward. "We recognize how critical you are. This reflects that." The CEO nodded, hands folded. "We want you here long-term, Grant." It was a good offer. Better than good. And yet, I closed the folder gently. "It's generous," I said. "Really?" The VP smiled nervously, waiting for the yes. "But," I continued, "this doesn't erase what happened." The smiles evaporated. "You tried to cut my salary by 60%, I said, voice steady. Not because the company was collapsing, not because I'd failed, but because it was convenient. No one knew what Halberd would, the CFO began, but I cut him off. "You didn't need to know. You needed to respect the people who keep the lights on." Silence. I stood. "I'll stay for now," I said, "to stabilize the contract, to clean up the mess, to make sure your biggest account doesn't collapse." Relief washed over their faces like a wave. "But I won't be here forever." The CEO blinked. "Meaning?" "I'll finish what I started," I said. "Then I'm gone." The CFO sat back, resigned. The CEO looked like he wanted to protest, but he didn't. He knew better, because for the first time, they weren't negotiating with an employee. They were negotiating with a man who had options. The next 2 months were the calmest I'd ever experienced in that building. They treated me like fragile glass, carefully, reverently, with the terrified respect of people who had learned the cost of arrogance. They gave me everything I asked for, every tool, every resource, every ounce of authority. The Halberd project didn't just stabilize, it thrived. We streamlined the system, eliminated legacy problems, and delivered a flawless rollout. Their team sent me thank you notes. Their board signed the extension without a single amendment. On the last day of the quarter, the CEO came to my office himself. "We're grateful," he said quietly. I nodded. I did my part. He hesitated. "Is there anything we can do to change your mind?" No, I said. It's time. He swallowed hard and didn't argue. That afternoon, I submitted my resignation. Professional. Clean. 2 weeks' notice. The reaction spread through the building like a shockwave. Some people looked disappointed, some relieved, some just stunned. Mike stopped by my desk near the end of the day. So, that's it? That's it, I said. You heading to Halberd? I shook my head. Not exactly. Because Halberd hadn't asked me to join their staff. They'd asked if I'd be willing to partner with them independently. A consulting contract. My own hours. My own rate. Triple what I'd made before. And they signed it gladly. My last day came faster than expected. I packed my desk, shook hands, ignored the stares. People whispered, but no one dared ask what really happened. It didn't matter. They'd feel the aftershocks long after I walked out. As I reached the door, I saw the CEO watching from the balcony upstairs. He raised a hand in a small, stiff goodbye. I nodded once, and left. Outside, the air felt lighter. Real. I sat in my car, closed the door, and let the quiet settle around me like a blanket. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't trapped. I was free. A month later, my new life didn't feel dramatic. It felt peaceful. Mornings started slow. Coffee the way I actually liked it. Work that respected my time. Clients who valued what I brought. Evenings that didn't end with exhaustion buzzing between my ribs. I'd built something calm, something solid, something mine. That company thought they were trimming excess. What they really did was cut loose the one person they couldn't afford to lose. And I didn't need revenge. I didn't need a grand gesture. I didn't need to watch them struggle without me. My satisfaction came from something quieter. I was no longer a replaceable employee trying to justify his worth. I was a man who knew it. And that peace, that calm, that life I'd built with my own hands was the part